I need to pull.
There's Dr. Davis.
Perpetually been the case.
Josh, hold on one second. Josh, hold on one second. Are we there?
You're on, Dr. Davis.
All right, well, hold on.
You're on. Oh, yeah. Look, you're looking sharp. Looking sharp.
Wonderful. Well, it is 3 o'clock. We'll wait a few more minutes for people to get on.
You're on. Oh, yeah. Look, you're looking sharp. Looking sharp.
Wonderful. Well, it is 3 o'clock. We'll wait a few more minutes for people to get on. You know, here we go. Okay, this is all righty. Getting more people on.
Good.
Wonderful. Thank you for sharing, Dr. Davis.
What did you share? So I can share it.
He shared the video if you go onto the seminary site.
Okay. Mine's not loading very quickly on my phone.
Waiting for everybody to come on.
Mm-hmm. I'll share it from Dr. Davis's page.
Yeah.
At least, you know, sharing doesn't work like a copy machine. You know, a copy of a copy is always worse.
Yeah, there Oops. I spelled discussion correctly.
Waiting for people to get on. We still have about 10 folks. We're going to wait a few more minutes just so that people can get on before we start. Hey, everybody.
Yeah. Thanks, Dr. Davis. Maybe my mom will watch. Get her down here for an M.Div degree.
Listen, she always knew you were going to be on TV.
I've been on TV for other things.
No civil unrest today.
Not that I'm involved with.
Right.
All right. Let's see.
I thought you'd be playing some background music, Fekecia, so that we would. This is when you need an MTS school song.
Oh my goodness.
Well,
we don't even have a nickname. You know, mascot. We don't have a mascot.
Yeah, we have a mascot.
We don't have a mascot like the Fighting Cumberlands or something like that.
You know what? I never thought about that. The fact that you're right, we don't have a
We don't have a
mascot.
mascot.
We need a mascot.
Yeah, Fekecia, we need a mascot.
Oh, goodness, let's see here. Wonderful. All righty, we're at 3:05. I won't delay our time, but hello everyone. My name is Fekecia Gunn, and I am the Director of Enrollment Services here at Memphis Theological Seminary. And thank you for joining us today for our virtual information session. We will be focusing on our Master of Divinity degree. Today, you all will be able to ask us questions. Make sure that you post your questions in the comment section, and throughout our discussion, we will pause and we will answer those questions. And so today I have two wonderful folks here with me. If you all will please introduce yourselves.
Go ahead, Chris.
I am Christopher Davis. I serve as Associate Dean of Doctoral Studies, as well as Associate Professor of Preaching and Pastoral Ministry at Memphis Theological.
And I'm Dr. Pete Gathje. I'm the Vice President of Academic Affairs and Dean and Professor of Christian Ethics at Memphis Theological Seminary. And I am the next door neighbor in office space with Dr. Davis.
That is correct. Won't you be my neighbor?
Yes, we are neighbors.
So super. Here is, I've crafted a list of questions that normally we receive in the admission office. And so we're just going to go through those questions and you all answer them as you see fit. So the first question is, who should get an M.Div? M.Div referring to Master of Divinity degree.
Gathje?
I think anybody who is interested in doing ministry in a congregational setting, that is a church, or a chaplaincy setting, such as a hospital or prison or the military, should have an M.Div degree. Anybody who's seeking ordination, whether their denomination requires the M.Div degree or not. We need people who are ministers who are theologically well-trained, deeply formed in their personal faith, and who are committed to the well-being of other human beings and indeed the whole creation. And I've just stated our mission statement of scholarship, piety, and justice. We need ministers who can lead the church and lead community organizations in this very challenging and difficult time. And that requires people who are able to think critically, who have a strong relationship with God, and who are seeking other people's good. Without those three things, it's pretty tough to do good ministry. And those are the three things that we emphasize repeatedly throughout our program at Memphis Theological Seminary. So who should get an M.Div degree? Anybody who's really committed to faith-based leadership in a church or in the broader society should get an M.Div degree.
Thank you for that. Why MTS for an M.Div degree? Why should they choose MTS?
Well, I will say this in terms of while we recognize that we are not the only institution out there, I think when you look at us, while we're not the only institution, there is no other place out there quite like us, where we are intentional and looking for meaningful intersections between theory and practice. MTS, beyond that, MTS is probably one of the few places where you will go where you could have upwards of 9, 10, 11 different denominations in one particular classroom. And that may be one of the first times in your religious experience where you don't simply get to say, those Baptists or those Methodists or those Episcopalians, they've got it wrong, and not have any conversation about it. So one of the things that I appreciated as an alum of MTS is not only is it engaging space, but it's safe space where it is okay to espouse your differences. Now, you don't get to simply be different for the sake of being different. And you don't simply get to say, this is what I believe because this is what my grandmother said. You know, we require a bit more substance than that, but it is safe space for you to explore what it is you believe, what it is you've never given any thought to, or what it is that others are saying that you find intriguing. MTS is a safe space for that. I mean, because whoever would have thought me, unapologetically, a card-carrying Black Baptist, would say that a Cumberland Presbyterian school was safe space. But that was certainly my experience while I was at MTS.
Nice. So how does this particular degree help in ministry?
Say again, Fekecia?
How does this particular degree help in ministry?
I'll say this and then I'll defer to the dean. 28 years ago, when I was exploring what it meant to quote unquote be called to ministry, I shall never forget the piece of advice that my pastor gave to me. Interestingly enough, a pastor who himself only had a high school education, said no college, no seminary. But he said to me, and he said, son, a call to preach. And of course, he said preach, but he understood it in the broadest sense of ministry. He said, son, a call to preach is a call to prepare, which of course, now that I look back at it in retrospect, how significant that was for someone who, by all accounts, had enjoyed a very successful ministry without going to seminary, for him to say, you have to do this, that the world is changing. The way we understand church and ministry is changing. And I mean, now it's changing at breakneck speed. So if you're going to be relevant, if you're going to be able to speak to where people are, you can't do that outside of being trained to do this work. Why the M.Div? Because it sort of gives you a broad introduction to all that is involved in the life and work of ministry. So it's not just preaching. It's not just pastoral care. It's not just education. We look at the broad spectrum of ministry, and that's what the M.Div does. It gives you the broad spectrum and then allows you the flexibility to really sort of focus in or sort of hone in those areas where you really feel a sense of call.
Yeah, I really think, and I speak as a lay person. I'm not ordained, but I think we need people in the ministry, as I really said in my opening comments, who are critically trained in theology, who know the Christian tradition, who know how to interpret the Bible, who know Christian theology and ethics, who have a sense of where Christianity came from and where it's been over its 2,000 years of history, so that they can speak intelligently about that Christian tradition. I don't think it's any secret that there's a lot of bad Christianity out in the broader society. And there are a lot of critics, and they're right to be critics of that bad Christianity. But there's a lot of good Christianity too. And that's what we're trying to do is to help in that struggle within Christianity itself, to say, this is really the mainstream of the Christian tradition. This is the tradition that's been committed to the well-being of everybody across racial divides, across social class divides, across national divides, political divides. This is a Christianity that is seeking the good of every human being and is seeking the good of God's creation. People need to know that tradition in order to speak intelligently about it. And people need to have ways in which they will be personally sustained in the ministry to develop spiritual practices that will guide them through what is clearly a challenging career, a challenging vocation. I mean, it is not easy to be a minister at any time, and certainly not in these times. And to have that kind of deep faith that is constantly nourished by the gracious and loving presence of God is crucial for good ministry. And we help students think through and practice that way of spiritual formation. And then finally, we're giving students the practical tools of ministry, how to preach, how to lead worship, how to run a church, the financial leadership that's necessary to run a good congregation. And that's all about really creating good relationships, which is about justice. And we're a seminary that's very committed to making sure that people who are prepared for ministry know how to be good people and know how to create and sustain good relationships, both within the church and outside of the church. And that's what justice is. So, how does this degree help in ministry? I just can't even imagine how anybody really does ministry these days without taking the time to engage in this kind of study and personal formation and learn those practices. And quite frankly, I think one of the reasons why a lot of churches have been in decline is because ministers haven't been prepared adequately to do those things well. And so we're very committed to having each of our graduates go out and be ready to do ministry well. In fact, to do it in a way that's excellent.
Mm-hmm. I like that. Those were good responses, doing ministry well. So we get a lot of questions in regards to the difference between a Master of Divinity degree versus a Master of Arts in Christian Ministry. Can you speak to the difference of both of those degrees?
I'd be delighted to speak to the difference of those degrees because I've had a direct hand in creating the Master of Arts in Christian Ministry degree. The M.Div was already kind of pretty set, though, our current curriculum emerged under my direction even before I was dean. So the key difference is that the M.Div degree is the degree for people who want to be leaders within pastoral settings, particularly congregations or in terms of chaplaincy. This is the gold standard degree for ministry within a congregational or institutional setting like a hospital or prison chaplaincy or military chaplaincy. So many denominations require the Master of Divinity degree because it is recognized as Chris had pointed out, the kind of degree that really prepares you across a spectrum of areas of knowledge and practice. The Master of Arts in Christian Ministry is not as many degree or credit hours as the M.Div. So the M.Div is 84 credit hours. The Master of Arts in Christian Ministry is 48 credit hours. So, a little bit more than half. So if you think about what is the MACM for, then it's not an M.Div light. Some people have tried to regard it as that, but the Master of Arts in Christian Ministry is for people who want to practice ministry, but do not see themselves as called to pastoral leadership within a congregation, a hospital, or chaplaincy kind of setting. So who are those people? Those are people sometimes who are associate pastors in churches, directors of Christian education, people who are doing youth and young adult ministry within congregations, or some other kind of specialized ministry within a congregation. Sometimes there's a social justice minister within a congregation. So they still could be doing congregational ministry, but just wouldn't be in that position of overall pastoral leadership. Or a number of our Master of Arts in Christian Ministry students are people who are specifically focused on doing ministry within the context of a nonprofit organization. So those are people who need a sort of a different set of knowledge and practice skills than people who are going to be doing ordained pastoral leadership within a congregation or other setting. And that's the M.Div is for that.
If I could just add this, Fekecia, for the benefit of those who may be watching or may watch later on, I'm really encouraging lay leaders in the church to look at the MACM, because here's one of the things that I'm discovering as I look at trends. Typically, senior pastors now are staying at churches somewhere between 5 to 7 years, and they are moving on to the next location. So we're discovering that the most stable level of leadership within churches tend to be trustees, deacons, and elders, those lay leaders, you know what I'm saying, who in those interim periods are giving real leadership to the church. So what I'm discovering is there's an increasing need for those lay leaders to really be trained theologically and biblically, because in so many instances, those are going to be the most significant leaders in their congregational setting. Nothing against those who serve as senior pastors, but when you look at the lifespan of a church over the course of, say, 50 years, they may have had 8, 9, 10 different pastors, but they've got some lay leaders there who have been there that entire period of time. So to the degree that we can train that particular group, that offers stability to the church in terms of as they're in those transitional periods. So I'm encouraging lay people, those, you know what I'm saying, chairs of deacons, and you know what I'm saying, those lead elders and those directors of Christian education and Sunday school, those individuals. The MACM is a perfect degree for them in terms of grounding them both theologically and biblically, so that they too can be actively engaged in sort of shaping the direction that that particular church goes in, especially in the absence of a senior pastor.
Wonderful. I appreciate you sharing that. So many people believe that the only people that attend seminary are those who are preaching, or those who feel that they have a call to pastor. And so we offer more than just education for those who are in ministry, but also those who are also ministering in a different capacity at the church level.
And while I say that I want to turn it into a competition, here's the reality. I mean, let's just be honest about it. When new pastors come in, of course, they've always got a vision. They've heard from God, this is direction. It's more difficult to sort of hijack the reins of the church when you've got trained lay leaders, you know what I'm saying, who are comfortable in their role and responsibility, you know what I'm saying, and their responsibility to that congregation. It is harder for individuals to sort of hijack those churches and move them in a direction that is not consistent with who they are. So I think churches, even senior pastors for that matter, have a vested interest in encouraging their lay leaders to come to seminary. And besides, they're much easier to pastor when they've been trained, because you don't have to do a whole bunch of arguing. If we can agree that this is biblically correct, this is theologically correct, then we can get on down the road.
Awesome, absolutely. I do want to talk about this in particular, because there are some prospective students that come through that parallel a Bible college or a Bible Institute course with the seminary course. And so can you all talk about the difference between the two of those?
Well, seminary is not, and I don't say this in a condescending kind of way, but it's important that students hear this. Seminary is not Sunday school 2.0. You know what I'm saying? It is not a glorified Sunday school class. And many students, they show up at seminary sort of expecting that. And they discover that it's something altogether different. Yeah, I mean, that's like, I liken it to, you don't go to med school with the expectation of learning how to distribute aspirin. I mean, you're learning to properly diagnose and treat. And we sort of see our work sort of the same way. So it's not a glorified Sunday school class. I mean, we're going to challenge you to sort of think deeply around what your convictions are in terms of not only what you believe, but why you believe what you believe, and whether or not what you believe is actually grounded in Christian tradition. There are those of us who like to believe that we've gotten, new revelations and new ideas directly from, the very throne of God. But what they will discover is, 3,000 years before you ever existed, the church was already sort of wrestling with these particular issues. You know what I'm saying? Maybe slightly different in a different part of the world, but but that's certainly the case. And then I'll say this, and I'll be quiet so the dean can talk. I think what seminary did for me personally, beyond just sort of teaching me how to exegete biblical texts and all of that kind of good stuff, it gave me a profound appreciation for the faith of my great grandmother who raised me. I thought, I'll share this brief story, then I'll quit. I remember when I took Dr. Paul Brown for Introduction to the Theology of Worship and Preaching. And as a Baptist, I had always grown up recognizing what we refer to as ordinances. Said baptism, communion. I had never in my life heard anything about a sacrament. It was an ordinance in the Baptist church. But the interesting thing would happen, my great grandmother, if she didn't go to church any other time, she went on the first Sunday of every month. And she would always say, go to church on the first Sunday so you can take sacrament. So I grew up as a kid hearing this term sacrament whenever it came to communion. So when I get to seminary, I heard communion, I heard the Lord's Supper, I heard the Eucharist, but I never heard anyone say sacrament. So I just assumed that, this was just my, uneducated, illiterate great grandmother. So I'm sitting in Paul Brown's class one day and he says, how many of y'all are Baptists? I raised my hand. He says, so you've heard of the ordinances. He said, well, in some traditions, they practice what's known as sacraments. I said, what did you say? He said, sacraments. And I said, well, I be damned. That's what she was talking about. And when I say, I was excited. And at that moment, I have never been more proud of that little old woman in all my life with no formal training. But there she was attempting to use something like sacrament in terms of her conversation about what she did in her church tradition. You know what I'm saying? So I was sold at that particular juncture because I discovered that on this journey, I'm going to have a much greater appreciation of what my foreparents believed and what they attempted to teach me. And that was my experience in seminary. It really, really was. I no longer say sacrament, but I appreciate it.
Good that a Baptist has some sacraments too. So, the thing about seminary is that it's professional preparation, right? It's practical professional preparation for the practice of ministry. So we are very much like a school of law or a school of medicine. We're not a graduate school in the sense of that just focuses on the head. We are trying to do those three things of the head, the heart, and the hands. So yes, it's intellectual. There is this critical intellectual component to theological study that we focus on here. But as we're focusing on it, as this connects with what Dr. Davis was talking about, is that our focus on that is so that our faith can be deepened, so that we've realized the connection between sacrament and those traditions that have existed within one's faith community that we sort of partially understood, but we've always been enlivened and inspired by them. And then finally, we're, as part of that preparation, we also have to learn how power works and how power in a congregation and power in the larger society. And how do we move those levers of power so that they're serving the well-being of other human beings, of the creation? How do we work those levers of power for human good and not let them become levers of power that are exploiting and oppressing people? And and that's crucial in this day and age where too much of religion is being used to hurt and harm people and to justify what is wrong. We need to have the theological and faith and practical resources to do good. And that's what a seminary provides. Over the course of several years of study. That's a lot different than just picking up a certificate at a Bible Institute or going to Sunday school or even going to a non-accredited, seminary. So we're also part of a larger community of seminaries around the United States and really the world that we call each other to accountability around those three areas so that we are really doing a good job of preparing people for the practice of ministry. So we're part of a community of seminaries that call each other to account. That's what accreditation means. If you got a seminary that's not accredited, they're not answering to anybody outside of themselves. And that's very dangerous, just like it's dangerous within a church to have a pastor who doesn't answer to anybody but him or herself. That's why you need a board of deacons to rein people in and to provide guidance, right? That's why you need a denominational structure. Well, our sort of denominational structure as a seminary, our accrediting bodies, the Association of Theological Schools and the Southern Association of Colleges and Schools. So we're double accredited. So we're answering to two of these communities of accountability. And that's part of what makes us an excellent seminary and really is providing the kind of the quality of education that students need who are going to go into ministry. I mean, you wouldn't go to a doctor who had not gone to an accredited medical school. You just wouldn't do it. You wouldn't go to a lawyer who hadn't passed the bar, and you can't pass the bar unless you've gone to an accredited law school. So why would you go to a minister who has not been trained at an accredited school of theology? You're putting your soul at risk. And in fact, that does happen. And that doesn't mean that the gospel can't be preached apart from seminary educated people. It certainly can, as Dr. Davis talked about his grandmother, and I certainly talk about my grandparents and my parents and how they've, steeped me in the faith. But they did not give me the disciplined and in-depth kind of theological education that I got at seminary.
Mm-hmm. Can you speak to NTS's approach to learning?
We are a hands-on place. Sometimes I refer to us as a blue-collar seminary. And the reason I call us a blue-collar seminary is because we really are focused on the practice of ministry. We want people to get the knowledge and the tools necessary to do ministry well. And so our approach is that we combine in just about every class knowledge and practice. So, and that's across the curriculum. We want the theology to be tested by experience in the practice of ministry. So one of the great things about how that happens is not just in the curriculum, but in the student body, that so many of our students are already engaged or have been engaged in some form of practice of ministry. And so they bring that experience to the classroom. But we also build into our classes, again, across the curriculum, internships, practicums, field experience, so that students are going out into the so-called real world of the practice of ministry, and they're being guided and coached by people who are already in the ministry, and then they're bringing that experience back into the classroom to speak with professors who are here, all of whom are experienced ministers, all of whom are people who are practitioners in the field of ministry in some fashion. Some are pastors, some are leaders of nonprofits, some are on the boards of nonprofits, but there's not a faculty member here who isn't engaged with the ongoing life of the church or the broader community. We don't have the ivory tower here. That's part of that being a blue-collar seminary. I don't really know what an ivory tower is. We don't have any ivory here because we don't believe in killing elephants. So we're not in the ivory tower. We're in a working class seminary providing the skills and the knowledge needed for people to do the serious work of ministry.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. We have a couple of questions. I want to pause right here. And one of those questions is from, I was going to say their name, but I'll just go ahead and read their question. A young lady graduated with her MACM this past December, and she would like to know what does she need to take to get a doctorate at MTS?
So she wants to move from the Master of Arts in Christian Ministry degree into the Doctor of Ministry degree. She needs to talk with Dr. Davis.
Traditionally, the MDiv was required for admittance into the DMin program. However, Dr. Gathje mentioned in terms of our accrediting agencies, they have given us some leeway now in terms of admission into the DMin program. And so what we do is we would take a look at the transcript. There are some things, and this is dictated by the particular track that they're taking. Let's say, for instance, you can complete an MACM and never take Introduction to Pastoral Care or take any of the elective courses. Well, the reality is you can't complete a DMin where the focus is on pastoral therapy and pastoral care, and you have not done the foundational work. So in many instances, we require what we call leveling courses. So it's dictated by the particular track. We need to make sure you've had the foundational courses to be successful in that particular program. Now, some foundational courses across the board in terms of introduction to Bible, like introduction to the New Testament, Old Testament, and the purpose of that is to make sure they are able to exegete biblical texts, because they're still going to need that particular skill set even in the Doctor of Ministry program. So the simple answer is we look at students on a case-by-case basis who don't have the MDiv to look at some areas where they may be lacking and say you need to complete these leveling courses. But the good thing is, depending upon what they need, you can actually start the Doctor of Ministry program while you complete those leveling courses. So.
Wonderful. Thank you for that, Dr. Davis. Another question is, what if you do not have your bachelor's degree?
That's a Dr. Gathje question. It depends. So we are allowed by our accrediting agency to admit a certain percentage of students who don't have a bachelor's degree. We look again at, some students don't have a bachelor's degree, but they have everything but the degree. So they took a lot of undergraduate courses. They just never got to, sort of finish the degree. That's one thing. Or some people have courses plus a lot of life experience in a certain area. And we can look at that and say, okay, that's, you've been through the school of hard knocks and you got your BA from that school. It's not official, of course, but we can perhaps let you in. Sometimes we will encourage those students to start a little slower than folks who are coming in with a bachelor's degree. So you might, instead of taking a full load of courses in your first year, you might say, hey, it might be good for you to start with taking one or two instead of a full load. So it's kind of like the DMin, though a little bit different, but we have to look at the individual student's record, their transcripts, if they have them from another institution, even without a degree, to be able to say, yep, you're ready to go. Or we might say, quite frankly, you would be better served right now trying to get that undergraduate degree before you would come to us. We are a graduate program. So we are, a post-baccalaureate degree program. And we have to maintain that kind of integrity, but there are ways of moving around that depending upon the individual applicant's record.
Thank you for that. Here is something off what I want you all to answer. What things should a person consider in choosing MTS? What things should a person consider in choosing MTS?
For me, I think the real question becomes, Are you really interested in growing, being challenged and being stretched? Or are you looking for someone to rubber stamp what you already believe? If you're simply looking for what you've always heard and what you've always believed to be rubber stamped, then MTS is just not, it's not going to be a good experience for you. It's just not going to be a good place for you because we're not that place in terms of, but if you're willing for someone to sort of critically challenge your positions, you know what I'm saying, to make you really think through, you know what I'm saying, does the text actually say this? Or is this what you've always heard? You know what I'm saying? Are you prepared for other students to say to you, what do you base that upon? Outside of just your culture and your tradition, what do you base that on? You know what I'm saying? So if you can stand up, if you're interested in that, there's not a better place in this country. If you just need for someone to say, yes, you're right, yes, you're right, then do yourself a favor. Don't come. It's not the place for you.
Yeah, and I would 100% agree with Dr. Davis, as I almost always do. You know, and I would add a few things. If you want to come to a place where, and Dr. Davis was alluding to that, where your own denomination or faith tradition will be challenged and opened up through dialogue, discussion with faculty and students, we're a good place for that. And in other words, if you want to be prepared to do ministry in the world as it is, where there is diversity of views, theological views, of faith traditions, of ways of being Christian, if you want to engage in that kind of conversation in a way in which will help you to grow in that conversation and not just, you know, have the kind of Facebook conversation of you said that, I say this, and, you know, we end up hating each other, but really to have a serious dialogue, an encounter with people who are different, but still committed to Christianity, to following Jesus, we're a good place. That's just in terms of the religious diversity that's here. If you want to come to a place that enters into serious dialogue and discussion about racial justice, we're a place for that. If you want to engage in a faith-based attention to the challenges that we face as a church, and there's a variety of challenges in how we preach, how we do worship, how we practice good pastoral care, we're the place for that. If you're a person who really desires to be shaped and stimulated in your life of faith, we're a place of that. We have a formation for ministry program that is excellent. We attend to the whole person here. So if you're looking for a school that is a school in the Lord's service, we are that place.
Wonderful. We have a question from a viewer. She would like to know, speaking of diversity, may I ask what percentage of your staff are female and what percentage are Black?
Of our the overall staff, I don't have an exact figure, but just going on sort of sight, about half of our staff is African American, if you're counting faculty and staff, and I'd say at least half are women, and maybe more. So there's diversity of race, class, gender, and theological conviction here at the seminary. And the way I like to describe it, I like to use a biblical metaphor for that. We're all different members of the one body of Christ. And so we flourish together by not being the same, which is how bodies flourish. Like Paul said, you know, imagine if the body was all ear.
All ears, right?
Yeah, where would the nose be? So we're the body of Christ in all of its wonderful diversity.
Wonderful. What about faculty? Can you give the breakdown?
Yeah, we're let's see, we are at, I think we have 8 full-time faculty right now. And of those 8, 3 are African-American. I'd have to count up women. It's a little over half are women.
Mhm. Wonderful. Thank you for asking the question. Can you speak to the course schedule and also transition into what MTS is going to look like for the fall?
Yeah, the course schedule. So in a traditional semester, which we're not going to have this fall, but in a traditional semester, we offer classes in 4 ways. So we have day classes, which are during the day. We have night classes that are at night. We have something that's called hybrid online classes, which 49% of the instruction takes place online, asynchronously, and 51% of the instruction is face-to-face in intensives that happen once a month. On Thursday, they start on late Thursday afternoon and go through Friday night. And then we offer also some limited 100% online courses. And that number of 100% online courses is going to go up based in part upon our experience with 100% online courses this past spring and as we're heading into the fall. So in the fall, we will be 100% online courses. Some of those will be synchronous. We'll have synchronous class meetings, which means the professor will be live with the students at the same time that the students are present live, sort of like what we're doing right now. We're doing synchronous. Some will be more asynchronous, which means you'll be able to, the instruction and the learning will take sort of place at the student's convenience, sort of when at the hours where the student is available to do that online work. And some of the classes are a combination of synchronous and asynchronous for the online instruction and learning. So that's this fall. Who knows what the spring will bring in terms of the pandemic that we're facing. I will say this, that our transition to 100% online was relatively easy because all of our faculty have been trained in online pedagogy. So we were not like some institutions where faculty were left kind of flat-footed because they had never done any online education and they had no training in how to teach online. Our faculty were already doing online hybrid stuff, but also already had training in how to organize and do online teaching. That's not simply Zooming with the students. Because a lot of places that offered what they called online education this spring, it really wasn't online education. It was emergency Zoom education. And there's a big difference between an online course that's really well designed and well run by a faculty member who has that pedagogical training and somebody who's just sort of ad hocing it.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for that. Do you all have anything that you would like to share with the viewers before I transition?
I definitely would like to share something about our both our faculty and our students. So before I became the dean here, I was on the faculty for 9 years. So I've been the dean 3 years. And what I can say is that our faculty are super committed to the well-being of our students. They are, of course, they're PhDs and Doctor of Ministry degrees, so they're very well prepared intellectually. But what's great about them is that they're really decent human beings. And they're people who are committed to, like I said, to the well-being of the students. And they're very much committed to the well-being of the church and to the broader communities in which we live. So they're not, they're not ivory tower scholars. They are scholars who are deeply committed to scholarship that serves the church and the community. And the students who come here are also serious about getting a good theological education so that they can be good in the practice of ministry. And it's great to be in a classroom with faculty who are committed and students who are committed to the same things. And there's a shouldn't use the word magic in theological schools or settings. I'll say there's a mystery to this of how the interaction of the diversity with that commitment and how it produces people who are leaders in the community. I was just talking with Fekecia before we came on. There's a letter that's going out to Mayor Strickland from concerned clergy in this city about the changing of the way in which policing is done in the city of Memphis. And there's the initial signatories. There were 11 initial signatories, and then they're adding others. They're inviting others to sign on as well. That's why I had a copy. I was being invited to sign on as well. Of those 11 signatories, 6 of them are Memphis Theological Seminary graduates. And one of them is the son of, I'm trying to put this correctly, there's a minister who has a son who's an MTS graduate. So 7 out of the 11 are connected in some way to Memphis Theological Seminary. That's the justice component, right? But that justice commitment comes out of theological scholarship and deep faith. So it's not just, partisan politics. It's about justice that's seeking the well-being of people in this community and seeking it in a way in which Memphis, Tennessee will become a better community. So it's not being presented in a rancorous way, but it is being presented in a firm and insistent and well thought out and well organized way. And that's what you get from Memphis Theological Seminary. We are a school for prophets who are pastors.
Wonderful. Dr. Davis?
Well, the only thing that I would add is that Memphis Theological, we take seriously the ministry of stewardship. By that, what I mean is what we won't do is we won't waste your time or your financial resources preparing you to lead or serve in a church that no longer exists. One of the critiques of seminary oftentimes is the church that is presented in textbooks is not the reality that students face when they leave seminary. Well, that's not the case with MTS. I mean, we're going to introduce you to the good, the bad, and the ugly. In terms of where the church does it well, we're going to celebrate that. But where the church is missing it, we're prepared to take the church to task and say, this is not what God requires. This is not what Jesus will honor. So what we won't do is allow you to waste 3-4 years of your time and graduate, and then you've been ill prepared to serve the church that's been waiting on. And the wonderful thing is we do our best to tailor your experience for the ministry you felt called to. That is to say, so if you're going to a rural church with 15 members, or you're going to an urban church with 250 members in the inner city, whatever the case may be, when you look at our faculty and staff, we have faculty and staff that serve in all of those places, in all of those spaces. So we will do our best to make sure that you're introduced to the practical ways to serve. And here's the other thing that we're going to own. No longer should you have any expectation of going to seminary, getting an M.Div, landing a job on some church staff where they're going to pay you full time, or being a senior pastor where they're going to serve you full time. The reality is many of them, the majority of our graduates, not just MTS, but most seminaries are going to be bivocational. So what does that look like? How do we train you? You don't have 25 hours a week to exegete a text and you know what I'm saying, from the original Greek to prepare to preach on that Sunday. That's just not the case. So you know, we're going to prepare you to be a bivocational pastor, you know what I'm saying, or be bivocational, serving in this nonprofit and working this job to take care of yourself and your family. We're not going to pretend like that's not a reality, and we're going to shape you to live into what that reality is. So we call that stewardship. We're going to be good stewards of your time and the financial resources that it takes to complete this journey.
Wonderful.
Amen.
Amen. And as an MTS alum, I have taken Dr. Davis where I have wanted to throw a shoe because he preached us under the table in the middle of class. And I have taken excellent. When you come to MTS and you take your preaching class with Dr. Davis, it will change how you look at the text and how you deliver it, the creativity, making sure that you have a connection with the text in your pocket at all times. And so I appreciated that. And then I actually took Christian ethics with Dr. Gathje, and I still use some of the things I learned in class in teaching youth ministry, still to this day. And so it's the education is definitely amazing. And I do want to read some of the testimonies of some of the students that are chiming in.
Before you do that, Fekecia, can I say this? In terms of, I appreciate my colleague, Dr. Gathje, I really do. And I'm excited about him being our dean. The only thing that I hate is because he's the dean, he's no longer in the classroom as much as he was when he was a professor. So one of my great joys, of course, that once you know Pete, there is no questioning whether or not he's a Christian and loves God. But I always look forward to students, particularly African-American students, who would come to seminary and take Dr. Gathje's class. And they would stop by my office and say, Dr. Davis, have you got a minute? Is Gathje saved for real? I said, he's saved, he's just not churchy.
So true.
That was always my great joy.
I have to agree with that. The very first class, I think my mouth was open the entire time.
That's right.
I was like, what did he say? He said, what? We're gonna do what?
That's
But
right.
yeah. Excellent class, excellent professor, and
Absolutely.
excellent.
Well, I missed the classroom, but you know, the real joy of being the dean is helping to facilitate the learning and the teaching that goes on at this institution. That's the joy that I get out of being the dean, is that I get to see the excellent teaching and the incredible learning that our students are doing here. And then I get all sorts of alumni that I'm in contact with, and I see the amazing ministry that they're doing. You know, just like today, to count up the number of MTS graduates that are signed on to that letter, that is delightful, because it shows that we're actually producing graduates that are consistent with what we say we're going to do. And so we're not a place that, has this high vision that we don't live up to. We have a very focused vision around those three things of scholarship, piety, and justice. And that's what you need in order to do ministry. And that's what we focus on. That's what we do in and outside of the classroom at the seminary. That's where we are focused.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Well, I'm going to, for the sake of time, transition into just going over the admissions process. So if you all have to go, you can. I'm about to share my screen because I know you all are busy. And thank you all so much for taking out your time today.
Thank you for having us.
Right. Listen, and for those of you who are watching, we know you've made up your mind now that you're coming to MTS. So while I won't get a chance to see you face to face in the fall because of virtual learning, I look forward to seeing you in the classroom in the spring.
Likewise. Well done.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Okay, let's see. So right now I am going to pull up just kind of what we have going on in regards to admissions. And so if you have any questions, just make sure that you post your questions in the comment section so that I'll be able to, uh, let's see, so wonderful. So that I'll be able to answer those questions as I go. So I'm just going to talk about admissions. Of course, you all were focusing on today the Master of Divinity degree. So that's the particular degree process, application process that I'm going to speak to. But here are the admissions requirements. For the master's degrees, you'll need to have a minimum of a bachelor's degree in no particular major is required. I know some people contact us and say that they don't have a bachelor's degree in any type of biblical studies. That's fine. My bachelor's degree is in accounting. The particular major that you acquired is not what we're looking at. We're looking at that the fact that you have a bachelor's degree. If you don't have a bachelor's degree, we, like Dr. Gathje shared before, we do have a process where we take a look at the individual person, and we're able to, according to our accreditation standards, we're able to make some adjustments. So it's basically a case-by-case basis. What we're looking for with your degree is that you have a minimum of a 2.5 GPA. Let me see if I can just go ahead and make this bigger. We're looking at the fact that you have a minimum of a 2.5 GPA on a 4.0 scale. If you do not have a 2.5 GPA, we still look holistically at the person that's applying. And what we're looking at, I'll get into a little bit later, but if you're below a 2.5 GPA, we do have a test that can be taken so that the 2.5 won't hold you up. We also ask for recommendation letters and a quality essay. When you apply, let me move my little, okay. When you apply, this is just the standard items that we'll be asking for: a $45 application fee, a master's application form, 3 recommendation letters from 1 clergy, 1 lay, and 1 either academic or professional person, transcripts, personal essay, goals of theological education. I'm going to go into a little bit more detail in these slides, but the deadline for the fall is going to be August 10th. So what are we looking for? So when you're choosing who's going to write your recommendation letters, please make sure that they know you. We have gotten recommendation letters where people were stating, I don't know, because they didn't really know the person's leadership. They haven't experienced them in leadership capacities or their character or their work ethic. Make sure they know you well enough in order to be able to talk about or share about who you are as a person. Our recommendation forms are, we have them hard copies, and we also have them embedded in the online application. Once you submit the application, our app will automatically send the recommendation letters to those people that you've stated will complete your recommendation forms. You just need to make sure that they know that the recommendation is coming, as well as that they are ready to fill it out online. Sometimes it goes to spam, and we just want to make sure that people are aware that those recommendation letters are coming, because most applications are held up because the recommenders didn't know the recommendation letters were coming. And so just to make the process smooth, we just really need to make sure that that we do our due diligence with our recommenders. For transcripts, they must be official. That just means that it has to come directly from the school to admissions. The transcripts we're looking for are all transcripts for the schools that you've attended. So every undergraduate, every graduate school that you've attended, even if you took a few classes, just make sure that you send them to the seminary. We do look at transfer credits. They must be approved by the registrar. If you are, if you'd like, you can send us an unofficial transcript for us to be able to review it prior to us getting the official transcript. That's fine. And so you could just email that to admissions@memphisseminary.edu. Now let's talk about this personal essay. The personal essay tells us about you. And so it's a holistic view and a brief biography of who you are. This is not a sermon. I know we are a seminary, but this is not a sermon. Do not send us a sermon. We want to know about you. We want to know the reasons you're wanting to study at the seminary. We want to know your perception on key issues concerning the church. We want to know the narrative of your spiritual journey. We want to walk alongside you in this journey. So this is where you tell us how we will be able to do that. So that's what we want you to focus on in your personal essay. Make sure that you also note that this is not to list all of your accomplishments in your work history. Those are great. They are icing on the cake. However, we want to know about the things that tug at your heart, those things that that has brought you to this place where you believe this is the next step for you to go. So make sure that in the midst of this, that you tell us about you, okay? The last thing is that we have theological goals for education. These are basically questions that we ask that we give to your advisor. This is how we pick your advisor and help navigate your success in seminary. And so these particular goals will help us to be able to connect you to the right person. When you're considering funding at MTS, you've got to make sure that you understand the tuition cost. And so for the master's degrees, it's $610 per credit hour. Full-time would look like 9 credit hours. And as you can see on the screen, part-time would look like 6 credit hours. And so you'll need to look at that, okay? So I don't see any questions, so I'm just gonna move forward. We will have more virtual information sessions for the month of July. Next week, we'll talk about the Master of Arts in Christian Ministry. July 16th, we're gonna talk specifically about women in ministry. There are some women who struggle with coming to seminary because they believe that they believe or they have been in a faith that believes that women cannot be called. And so we're going to talk about that with some of our faculty that's on staff. And then July 23rd, we're going to talk about financial aid and scholarships. And so if you have any questions in regards to any of those, join us yet again. We will be doing our virtual information sessions every Thursday in July at 3 o'clock. If you have any questions, email us at admissions@memphisseminary.edu or just give us a call, and that's listed on the screen. And you know what? I'm just like Dr. Davis. You should really go ahead and join us. If you'd like to apply, you can go to memphisseminary.edu. We have online applications. We also have a way that you can request more information where we will email you information about the different degree programs. Today, we were specifically speaking to the Master of Divinity degree. Next week, we'll speak to the Master of Arts in Christian Ministry, which has a specialization. But make sure if you have any questions that you connect with us via email, give us a call, or connect with us online. Connect with us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube. And so that's our time. I wanted to keep us at an hour. Let's see here. So that I could honor you all's time. And so I am grateful that we had this time to be able to talk about the Master of Divinity degree and the importance of that degree, the importance of people getting that degree, and then also why you should choose MTS. And so you all have a great day. And if you need to talk or you have a question, please don't hesitate to give us a call or to shoot us an email or to drop a comment. Talk with you all later.